Welcome to the Warlord tank build series. On the workbench we have today the KV-1, KV-2 heavy tank, and my name's Rich C and we'll be taking you through building this tank through to painting and the final decals and detailing of this wondrously heavy beast. Inside the box we've got the 1/56 scale hard plastic KV-1 heavy tank or the KV-2 self-propelled artillery gun. 8 plastic tank riders, bolt action stack cards, full colour water slide decal sheet, construction leaflet, damage markers. A rather nice pack, clearly sealed. Inside the diagrams you've got plenty of information for how to build it, including all the parts which you might want to leave unglued. You've also got very detailed paintwork guides, so you can give your colour schemes either the summer, autumn or winter for the Russian front. Plus you've now got brand new play cards for bolt action for both the KV-1 and KV-2, including all their points values and play points in the game, and a very nicely detailed water slide decal sheet. The plastic frames themselves, highly detailed, including all the parts you need to build both versions of the tank when it comes to the turret. Ton to build. So first off here we're going to be taking a nice turd of parts and giving them a bit of a clean. Just take off the parts you need, test fit them before you put the glue on. When it comes to the sprockets, make sure you know where those fit first before gluing them in, and just twiddle them into place. The track links, double check that you've got them facing the right direction, and they should just sit perfectly in place. Just a little bit of glue, watch out for the stringy extra bits from the plastic glue, and it should just slot nicely on top, and with a little bit of jiggling you should have it all neatly run. Again, just double check that your track links all face the same way. When you're building the hull plate, make sure that first part, the rear where the engine housing would be, and the gearbox would be, has actually gone in place properly before applying your tracks. A little bit of glue should just do the job. And once we've glued the tracks to the hull, leave it upside down to keep the tracks nice and even, and we can get on with building the rest of the tank. So following the instructions, we're just running through, cleaning up everything, test fitted it, make sure it all sits into place nicely, and whilst that hull is drying we can just get onto the turret and the gun itself. Now the gun, if we want it in a working position, I'll need to make sure that the little component here fits snugly. It might take a slight bend to make it fit. Once it's all glued and it's had time to dry, you can fit the turret together properly and you should end up with a working gun. Now we've obviously gone ahead and made both turrets here. We can pop it on just to show you what it's like. Nipped out and done a bit of spraying outside. Use a mask if you need to, and make sure you're in a well ventilated area. Starting with angel green from underneath and an army green from above, with fur brown for the tracks. Once you've done the spraying and they've fully dried, we're back indoors to get the brown back on the tracks. Again, fur brown, just whiz around with it. Make sure the tracks are all covered, and don't worry if you've got brown here and there on the actual hull. That'll be mud later on. Then we get a bit of our metallic, just test it on the bottom of the track. We've brushed some of it off on the paper as a dry brush technique. We whiz around the tracks to bring out the detail. Then it's onto the hull and the greens. So we use army green, as it's a perfect colour match. We probably won't see much change in detail here, but I like to give it a bit of a weathered look before we put the decals on. Just slightly watered down. Again, make sure there's not much paint on the brush. We're using the dry brush still. The bigger the brush the better. And we just run around with vertical strokes to create kind of a subtle streak effect. You can go all around the tank with this. Now of course, sun, dust all make the green slightly lighter. So here we're just adding a bit of our bone colour into the original army green. Mix it up, again brush most of it off on the paper before you apply it to the tank, and just very lightly work around the edges, again in downward streaking motions. Moving on to the decals. First we're going to cut out the decal. Be fairly neat and close to the actual markings. So we'll leave the decal to soak. When the decal starts lifting from the sheet, we can just ease it off from the decal sheet onto the tank where we want it. You notice we're using a nice wet brush. Once we've adjusted its position, dab with a bit of tissue until the decal is nice and dry. Make sure you don't rub, but just roll the tissue on. On to inking. We're now doing some detail work. Now, for oily streaks, and rust marks to really pick out the details, I'm using the strong tone and the soft tone together. And it's either one or the other, or a mix of the two to various degrees, depending on how dark I feel I need it. Now you can see here, we're just allowing the ink to roll off from the brush into corners, and then once you've got the ink in place, a little bit of water on the brush to draw the ink around into the detail that you want to cover. Work your way around the tank, a little bit here and a little bit there until you're actually happy with it. Sometimes less is better, but of course when it comes to the tracks, a little extra doesn't hurt. Oil streaks, think where there are brackets, streaking down from those, where the rain would pool and then run down later on, gradually forming rust. Think about where the rain would run down the edges of the tank. Think about where it would sit and pool, where rust would start to occur. Now of course most of these tanks you wouldn't find much rust unless the tank had been in operation for an awful long time and hadn't been under any kind of repairs. Right, once the decals are on in place, we're just going to give it a dusting. We're going to use that brighter tone, that bone, to create a dust effect. Again, we can be really rapid and quick with this, and doing tanks in batches is always a good idea. And just whipping around, making sure all the detail covered as though it's been covered in dust. Now we move on to the mud and details. Now this can get a bit messy, so use an old brush, get a bit of static grass, mix it in with a burnt brown or a muddy brown colour. Oak brown used here works quite nicely. Mixing in a bit of static grass allows you to get a bit of texture and mud on there. Slap it all over where you'd expect to find it. Back of the mud guards, down the sides here and there, maybe a little bit around where the... And there you go. Your KV-1 or KV-2 tank is finished and ready to roll out onto the bolt action battlefield. Thanks for watching the first episode of Warlord Workbench. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss any further Workbench builds. Thanks for watching the first episode of Warlord Workbench. Like this Facebook page to make sure you don't miss any future Workbench builds.